You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and man, we have another amazing show lineup for y'all. We have an amazing guest. We're going to talk to Mr. Bryson Tarbet. He has an amazing website. It is thatmusicteacher.com. And you guessed it, he is a music teacher himself, and we're going to learn everything about his amazing career. And first and foremost, Bryson, I have to give you a shout out because Ohio, I went to the University of Toledo, so you're not that far from Columbus. So welcome to the show. How you doing?
Not too bad. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, sir, man. So, man, for the audience, kind of, give us a little backstory how you became a music teacher.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a long and winding road to get here. I left high school thinking I was going to be the next greatest high school choir director, and then quickly found out that I wanted nothing to do with teaching high school. Thankfully, I found my home in the elementary music classroom and kind of dove right in from there. I ended up going back and getting my master's degree in specialized elementary music pedagogy. I've also started my online business, That Music Teacher, where I help kind of bridge the gap between elementary music teachers that are in the classroom and the professional development that districts are giving, because the reality is the professional development that music teachers are getting really isn't the most specific to what we're actually seeing in the classroom. So I wanted to make sure that the music teachers actually felt like they knew what they were doing. So that's kind of where I've got started and how I've gotten here, and here we are.
You are the CEO of That Music Teacher, LLC. So what were some of the main goals and objectives for your organization?
Well, when I started it started out completely by accident. I was missing the connection with music teachers. So I created an Instagram account, and it just kind of kept spiraling from there. We started a podcast, That Music Podcast, we're again kind of bringing in conversations, amplifying voices, as well as really helping out with that content-specific professional development that teachers are really needing. And it's grown from there a lot. We started doing digital courses, and this past summer, we started the Elementary Music Summit, which was basically a free online conference specifically for teachers that teach elementary music, so that they can get the content-specific professional development that they need so that they can have a really successful school year. And what I love about it is we are just finishing up getting all the planning done for the next summit, which is coming in July. And it's been an absolute journey being able to essentially impact classrooms from all over the world. And it's something that I don't take lightly, because I know that trusting someone with your classroom, even if you're still the one teaching, but trusting them with, helping you along the way is something that is really, really special. And it really it makes my heart full in so many different ways.
And on your website, when people go to thatmusicteacher.com, you have a free ebook that people can check out. That ebook is called The Steady Beat Survival Guide. Give us a little teaser what all that's about.
Oh my goodness, that is the book that I didn't realize people would actually want. It's been in my mind for years, which is essentially, it's 30 of my favorite songs, chants, and activities to teach steady beat in the elementary music classroom. Steady beat is so important. It's literally foundational for everything that happens. But there are only so many ways you can teach it, right? There are only so many things. So these are basically my 30 favorite ways to do it in the classroom. And when I came out with this guide, I was like, all right, well, I'll put it out there and see what happens. And it very quickly became my top downloaded resource, because the reality is that elementary music teachers, we understand how important steady beat is, but we oftentimes lack the time to find that extra special thing to try something new, and being able to kind of share my ideas in the ways that it really works in my classroom has been really, really helpful. And I love being able to share that with others.
We're talking to our guest today, Bryson Tarbet. You go to his website, thatmusicteacher.com. And man, when it comes to challenges, right, we all faced as business owners, but you specifically in the music educator space, what are some of the insights that you've been able to see along the way as far as challenges that can be faced around the country by, educators in the music world?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the kind of elephant in the room, which is, as we're recording this, it's like we're kind of at the tail of the COVID pandemic, and COVID really changed so many different industries, but music education changed really completely overnight. I mean, in my district, there were quite a long time where we weren't allowed to sing. We weren't allowed, or if we were, we had to be outside and 6 feet apart. And it was just constantly, every single day that we had different restrictions on what we were and weren't allowed to do. And it really required me and other teachers around the world to just figure out a brand new way of music making. And as much as COVID was awful in so many different ways, have been some really cool things that have come out of it. One thing for me is I've really been able to see that there is just a different type of music making that we don't necessarily encourage in our students a lot. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what music education is in reality in America's public schools and what music education should be when it comes to educating the students that are in our classrooms. And the reality is they're not quite aligned yet. They're definitely getting closer. We're definitely, doing things like implementing more culturally responsive things and bringing in music that's not just the same music we've been singing for years and years, but like, what are some music that the kids are listening to? What are some TikTok trends that we can get, that involve music that can really bring in what's happening in a student's life into our classroom, rather than us trying to kind of present music as this this special thing that only certain people get to do in certain different ways, but really show it in a way that music is for everyone, and the way that can look can be completely different depending on who you are and what you're looking for.
And with your personal experience, how have you used your very own experience in teaching different levels of students who are in these classrooms? Because everyone's at a different level when it comes to music, and those who might have some sensory, different ways of learning. How do you adjust that?
Yeah, that's one of the double-edged swords of being an elementary music teacher is we teach hundreds of students, but we get to see them usually year after year. So we can kind of get to know them and understand where they are from previous years and how we can move them forward. But you bring up a really good point when you talk about the sensory needs of our students. This is something that even in my short time in the school system, I've seen drastic changes when it comes to the understanding and the awareness of teachers when it comes to sensory differences. I have sensory processing disorder and ADHD, and my neurodiversity has really shaped a lot of who I am as an educator because it's allowed me to see things from a different lens. Oftentimes, if you're in a classroom and you see a student that is completely unable to sit still and they're not really in control of their body and they feel like they're kind of driven by a motor, a lot of times that can be kind of brought back to some sort of need that's not being met. And a lot of times that comes down to the sensory needs. So a lot of people really haven't heard of sensory needs. So sensory needs really are, if we zoom out into like a macro level, is sensory needs are the needs that are basically making sure that our nervous system is regulated. So for instance, if we were in a room with a bunch of noise, if we had a bunch of music playing, a bunch of different conversations going on, if we have different people that are playing drum sets and things like that, and there's just a lot of noise or sensory input going in, anyone might find that distracting. But someone that might have a sensory need or sensory processing disorder, they might have that same kind of reaction to a situation that really isn't necessarily what others would consider as noisy. And it could be there's just a certain threshold of sound. It could be a certain type of sound. We could do the same thing with lighting and just visual stimulation, having that physical input. And essentially what that does is when our sensory needs are not being met, our body reacts to it in a very physical way to help us try to fill that need. So oftentimes you'll see students that have this, really this need for tactile input. They really need things touching them, or they need that physical input. And what you'll see them doing is doing things like jumping or rocking or kind of, hitting the table or things like that to give themselves the physical input that their nervous system is saying that they're not getting. And when we create sensory friendly environments, we're allowing those students to be set up for more success, so that when we say music is for everyone or our classroom is for everyone, we truly mean it because we've done the work to get there.
Once again, talking to our guest today, Bryson Tarbet, and you can go to his website, thatmusicteacher.com. This leads us to circle back a little bit to the Elementary Music Summit, because you have over thousands, right, of elementary music teachers who have joined you. So what is some of the things that people can learn more about this and how they can get involved in the future?
Yeah, there are definitely ways. Like you said, we had over 2,400 people in the Elementary Music Summit join us this past year. If you're listening and you'd love to join us, we'd love to have you. It's July 10th through 14th this year. If you can go to thatmusicteacher.com/summit, and that'll take you to all the places to learn more about that. But even if you're not listening, you're like, all right, it's my summer. I don't have I don't really want to have to give more of my time in the summer and I totally get that, because we are all overworked and underpaid. But I have some great guides on my website, thatmusicteacher.com. I have a guide for ensuring students with disabilities needs are met, kind of like we were talking before. We have that Steady Beat Survival Guide. And then we also have the Elementary Music Newbie Guide, which is essentially all of the foundational decisions you'll need to make, whether you're going into your classroom for the first time, or if you're going in maybe to a new setting, or maybe you're just ready to kind of mix it up a little bit and try something new. That's all ways to kind of really bring things, trying to add some new things in your tool belt and see what works for you and for your students.
And when it comes to this point blank music education, in your opinion, how does that contribute to the overall development of a well-being of a elementary school student?
Oh my goodness, we could have an entire discussion just on that question alone, because the reality is, music has been a huge part of my life for my entire life. But I know that that's not necessarily the point of view of everyone. But the reality is, and research supports the fact that students that engage in a music education, even if they don't continue professionally or even amateurly doing music into their adult life, they tend to do better in life. They tend to have do better on standardized tests. They tend to have better social and emotional learning skills. They tend to be able to foster more relationships. And the reality is, and kind of the reasoning behind that is, not only are we teaching music in our classroom, we are teaching team building. We are teaching the ability to be wrong, the ability to see things from a different lens. And then from a kind of a neuroscience perspective, the act of doing music actually strengthens your synapses. And, we have these two hemispheres in our brain, and between the two, we have something called the corpus callosum. And the act of doing music actually thickens the corpus callosum, which makes the neural connections from both hemispheres much more efficient, which helps in so many different things that we do in our life other than just playing music.
I'm glad you said that, because I have to ask you, because you're the teacher, and also when you hear people say things like, oh, you should listen to classical music when you study and stuff like that, even mothers with their, newborn, well, not newborn, while they're pregnant, sometimes you hear about listening to music, all that good stuff. How much of that is true, and is there any studies that back that up?
Well, there's a little bit of both. So what you're referring to, what I'm assuming you're referring to when it comes to listening to music in utero, there is the study called, kind of been keyed as like the Mozart effect. And if you really look at that study, the study itself is not super found academically. Yes, there is some data in that study that supports the cause and the hypothesis, but the reality is that future studies really haven't been able to repeat that. With that being said, when it comes to listening to music or doing things like that, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence when it comes to kind of retrieval. For instance, when I study, I like to listen to the same type of music because when I kind of get into that, it kind of helps me get into that mindset. And whether or not there's much actual research to support it, there to me, it really helps me get into the mindset of being ready to study and say, hey, I'm going to bunker down. I have this essay to write. I'm going to put some music on in the background. But again, it's gonna depend a lot on the individual, on what you want to listen to, what type of music you want to listen to, and if you find it helpful or not. But there's so much research out there that supports different uses of music, and there's just so much ongoing research, and we're going to continue to learn more about the power of music as we keep going.
And a follow-up question to that is, well, if you look around, if you listen, I should say, music is everywhere. It's in the commercials, it's radio, it's TV, movies, anything that has some kind of visual, has some kind of music behind it. Are there any studies that show that music really is persuasive and, maybe the public, buying a certain product?
Oh, there's so much research that goes into music and sociology. I mean, if you think about it, when you're watching a commercial, the commercial has some sort of goal in mind. And usually that goal is to get you to buy their thing. And usually they do that by playing at certain emotions. So if you're watching a car commercial, you're probably going to be seeing a car driving on a mountain, going really fast. And you're going to hear this music that is going to give you a little bit of kind of that energy, kind of make your adrenaline pump a little bit, because that's the kind of emotional response that they're trying to get. If you're listening to something, think about the Sarah McLachlan, ASPCA, they're playing Arms of the Angel, in the background so that you're donating to the ASPCA to help these animals that are in need. And the reality is that song has an emotional connotation that connects with the goal of the advertisement. And yes, there are certain ways that this is done poorly and in a way that's like not ethical. But think about when you're watching a movie and they play music and different music, depending on where you're at in the plot, that music is going to help tell the story as well. If you're watching a horror movie, the music is going to be very different than if you're watching a Disney children's movie. But the reality is all of that music is going there to create an emotional response, to create a better perceived value of what you're seeing.
And not to get too deep in the weeds, but music, it also has some math involved. I mean, for you as a music teacher, do you kind of go deep into the math side of music as well?
I mean, there are so many different ways to take it, because you're exactly right. I often tell people, I don't teach math. Or I'm not a math teacher, but I tend to teach a lot of math concepts. They might just be disguised. If you're thinking about formal music notation, Western music notation, a lot of it goes down to meter. We have quarter notes, eighth notes. We have 4 beats per measure, 6 beats per measure, and everything goes in this metrical fashion that, exactly like you're right, really comes down to math. But kind of on the flip side of that as well, music and language development. It's so cool to see how musical development and language development in the brain are very similar. And the stages of musical development and language development are also very much the same. Because when you get down to the reality of it, is whether or not music and math are different could be up for debate. But music is such an innately musical thing that it encompasses so much of the other aspects of our life, because it's that integral in the way we as humans have come to be where we are today.
Once again, talking to our special guest today, Bryson Tarbet. You go to his website, thatmusicteacher.com. Man, time's always flying by. We still got a little bit more left with you. When you look at the opportunity for the next, I wouldn't say, I'll just keep it general, the future of education, right? How important, in your opinion, is it for parents to really take seriously at least allowing the kids to get involved in experiencing music and the fundamentals of the education part?
Well, again, I see a lot of value in music. Music has been a huge part of my life. But I understand that there are going to be people that don't see the value in music. And to those people, what I would say is this. There is so much more to the world than yes or no answers. Sometimes there are things that are in between. And what I love about music is that, especially in this super high stakes testing environment that we tend to be in education, unfortunately, our students are often taught that there is a wrong answer or a right answer. And sometimes when we give them situations where there are multiple right answers or there are things, correctness is a spectrum, that allows us, it can really catch a lot of these kids off guard. Because if we aren't modeling creative thinking, lateral thinking, problem solving in a way other than just let's get to the answer, we are not allowing them to practice these skills that they're going to be using in their everyday lives for the rest of their life. And not getting too much on a soapbox, if I had to really kind of give what I hope for the future of education, especially to any parents listening, is to really think about the rhetoric you're hearing about education in general. The past few years have definitely made things even more dividing when it comes to the rhetoric of what teachers are trying to do and who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. And the reality is that the vast majority of teachers, the vast majority of administrators are really trying to do what's best for our students and really let's do what's best for what we can do to prepare the children that we have in front of us for today, for a world that doesn't exist yet. And we're going to have some growing pains and we're going to make some mistakes along the way. But the reality is we are all on the same mission to make sure that the kids that are sitting in kindergarten class right now, 12 years from now, they're going to be walking across the graduation stage, ready to enter the workforce, ready to enter the military, ready to go to college, ready to take whatever that next step is. And we are just trying our best. And that rhetoric sometimes gets in the way of us remembering that we are on the same team.
And with that said, you also have a podcast that people can digest even more content of what you're providing. It's called That Music Podcast. So what are some of the focus, core values, and mission that you're trying to do with the platform?
So within that podcast, we really dive into professional development for music teachers at the elementary level. A lot of it comes down to the pedagogy of, what to teach when, how to teach that, how to ensure we're removing barriers to access to the curriculum so that everyone can be involved, but also how can we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as teachers? Because the reality is if we teach until we have nothing more to give, we're not going to make it for our entire career. We would rather have a teacher give 95% for 35 years than 110% for 5 years. And the reality is that teachers are set up for failure in a lot of different ways by a lot of different systems that are not so great. And we need to keep working towards allowing teachers to feel empowered so that they know where that line is, so that we can make sure students are getting what they need, but also protecting our own self-care and our own longevity in the field. Because otherwise, our teaching shortage is only going to get worse, and the problems that we already see in education are only going to be more exacerbated.
That's a great point that you have there. When there's a parent listening to this episode right now, and they just generally want to get their, kids more into music versus what's currently being done at, the school they're going to, or they just want additional resources. Your website, thatmusicteacher.com, what's some of the things that they can navigate and enjoy some additional resources?
I would definitely direct you on the main page. I have my freebies that you can download, and they're always being updated to have kind of the more up-to-date and some new information. So if you go to thatmusicteacher.com, scroll down a little bit, you'll see the free guides and kind of see what's kind of the area you're going for. What kind of do you feel like we would need a little bit more understanding? And if there are parents that are really trying to dive deeper into what education for their child musically could be, whether it be in school or out of school, I would say definitely reach out to their music teacher at school if they have one, and see if they have any recommendations for like further steps or like music lessons or anyone that they know in the area that would be a good fit, and kind of take it from there and kind of start that conversation.
Once again, been talking to our guest today, Bryson Tarbet. You can go to his website, thatmusicteacher.com, and also check out his podcast, That Music Podcast. Man, time flies by. You know what they say, we're having fun. So I want to say thanks, Bryson, taking time talking to us today. What else will you want to tell our audience for a call to action?
I have really appreciated you having me here today. I love this conversation. And I just kind of want to leave anyone listening with this, which is, you might not be the next great musician. You might not be the next Mozart or anything like that. But the reality is you have an innately musical aspect. Humans are innately musical, and you might just not have found the way that you want to do that, and kind of explore, see what happens, and encourage those around you to do the same.
Well, there you go. Make sure you go get that free ebook that you can check out, the Steady Beat Survival Guide, and visit Bryson's website, thatmusicteacher.com. Once again, man, appreciate your time. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for having me.